Hey everyone, I'm John from Wiley Visuals, and in this video I'm going to dig into some of the behind the scenes and give you the backstory to the most recent surf edit that I released. I'm really proud of this clip, not because I think it's a particularly great video, but because I have a bit of a history with this location and I was able to break through some big personal barriers. This is a video I filmed at a surf spot called The Box in Western Australia during the Margaret River Pro surfing competition. This wave is just across the bay from where the main competition site is. However, it only breaks when the conditions are just right, which is not all that often. When it does turn on during the event period, they'll sometimes move the competition over there. But even if they don't, most of the world's best surfers will jump at the opportunity to paddle out there for a few waves outside of competition. It offers a really short, intense ride over an incredibly shallow reef, and it's a really challenging wave even for the best surfers in the world. It can be an absolute spectacle to watch, and there's a deep water channel right next to the wave, so it's a perfect setup to be able to film it from the water or from a boat really close to the action. However, the wave is not the only danger out there, as this particular coastline is notorious for big, toothy fish. In fact, the competition here was cancelled halfway through the event a few years ago after there were 2 shark attacks in the same day just a few kilometres away. Now, I'm not particularly worried about sharks in general. I live in another notoriously sharky part of the country and spend a lot of time in the water surfing and filming. I've had a few encounters in my time, but I also know the statistics of actually being bitten are incredibly low. However, the Box is one location where I've been totally spooked ever since my first experience out there in 2013. Before my first trip to Western Australia, I'd heard a lot of things about how sharky Margaret River was, and living where I do, I'm sort of used to it anyway, so that talk didn't really bother me. So on the first day of the trip, I got down to the beach to find that the Box was actually okay and there were a few guys taking it on. So I thought I'd swim out there and shoot it from the water. Now this wave breaks on a reef that's about 600 metres off the beach, so it's a long way to swim out, but I was happy to do it without a second thought. I was about halfway out when I heard a really strange squealing noise, and I sort of looked around to see if it was kids playing on the beach or something like that. But there was no one around, so I just shrugged it off and kept swimming. And then when I'm almost out, about 50 metres away from the surf break, I see a wave wash up onto the shallowest part of the reef. And in that wave, there was half of a very fresh looking seal carcass ragdolling across this little slab of limestone. So at that point, I realised that the squealing I'd heard was the last breaths of a seal that had just become lunch for a shark. And how easily it could have been me, given that I was wearing a dark wetsuit and flippers and could easily have been mistaken as a seal by a hungry ambush predator. So there I was, bobbing nearly 600 metres away from safety while seal blood is turning the whitewater around me red, and realising that I've got to swim all the way back in. By this point, I also noticed that all the surfers had jumped up onto a couple of jet skis, so they'd most likely seen what had happened and got the heck out of there quick smart. So I started feeling very alone. That swim back to shore was the longest, scariest swim of my life, and one half of my mind was just wanting to race back as fast as I could, and the other was telling me to go slow and not panic or splash too much, as that's one thing that can actually attract sharks. I was so relieved when I made it back to the beach, and the whole experience left me really spooked. I knew the risks and reputation of this particular region, but to go through that ordeal the very first time I went in the water there gave me some serious doubts about going back in. It was a few years later in 2015 that I visited again, and looking at the forecast before I went there, I knew there would be some really good days at the Box. So I came up with a plan to paddle out there with my surfboard and camera. That way I'd feel a little bit less vulnerable knowing that I could move around faster and could quickly catch a wave and ride it to the beach if I saw anything that gave me the spooks. So the trade-off though is that makes it much harder to position yourself to film the wave. You've got to be further away and use a longer lens, so the footage ends up having a lot more wobble in it than if you're right up close swimming. And you also get problems with fogging, as the camera spends more time out of the water where it's exposed to the sun and can get warm. So as a result, I wasn't really happy with any of the footage I got from the water on that particular trip. I've been back nearly every year since then, but haven't really ever had the conditions line up to be able to film the box until earlier this year. Over the years though, I did spend a lot more time surfing over there and just getting more comfortable in the ocean there in general after that first really scary experience. And then finally this year, we had a really good run of waves where there were several opportunities for me to film at the box. The first day I decided to paddle out with a surfboard, but again, I didn't really get the results I wanted. Then again, a couple of days later, the waves were firing and there was a good crew of surfers out there, as well as a few other shooters with jet skis. And I decided it was time to get back on the horse and try to get over my fear out there. So I swam out from the beach with just my camera and flippers for the first time there since the shark incident 8 years earlier. That was a huge mental hurdle for me, and I actually had to stand on the beach for about 20 minutes beforehand, psyching myself up before I went in the water. I know lots of other people do it on a regular basis, although all the other photographers on this particular day had taken a ride out on a jet ski or a boat. So I just had to keep telling myself all those things that I know about the reality of shark attacks. It's incredibly rare and unlikely. People swim out there all the time without any trouble and so on. I was super nervous the whole way out and just kept having flashbacks to seeing that seal rolling over the reef. I was hyper aware of everything going on around me and really had the adrenaline pumping. It felt like the whole swim was in slow motion and took forever, but I eventually made it out and was able to settle down a little bit. I certainly felt much safer being in a little pack of photographers all swimming in close proximity, and knowing that there were a couple of jet skis nearby if things did go bad. And once you're out there, there's so many other things taking your attention that you don't have time to really think about imaginary scenarios. You're just constantly focusing on your camera settings, your positioning, what the ocean's doing, and where the surfers are. I managed to get a few clips that I was kind of happy with. One in particular of Ethan Ewing where we lined up nicely, but I by no means consider myself a water cinematographer. It's certainly a specialty craft, and I'm just happy to get in the water from time to time for a bit of variety. I was able to put together a little edit of the 2 sessions out there from this year, and I was really proud of it, not because of the content itself, which is probably way off the mark of what a true water shooter would have captured, but just because it represents a massive personal achievement to do something that has terrified me for a long time now. As a creative, it's really hard when you know you can achieve a certain outcome, but there's just something standing in your path, whether that's fear or anxiety or budgets or resources. So to be able to overcome those challenges and achieve your goals in spite of them is something that I think all creatives can relate to, and something that I'm really proud of in this instance. Thanks for listening to this little story, and if you haven't already, then you can check out the final video right here. You can also subscribe for more behind the scenes and video production tips in the future. I'll catch you next time.